Hi, folks. You with Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about educational programs for gifted school students. I noticed, and it's been in the news a bit recently, that the Mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio, has or is about to end the New York schools program for gifted or bright students. The reasons that him and his flunkies are citing is that 75% or so of the kids doing it are white, and therefore it's racist or something like that. It seems to be an ideological take on things, and not very well thought through at that. So but this is something that's going right across the Western world. It's not just New York or California or something like that. It's going all across the Western world. And what they're doing is they're either shutting down the programs entirely, or they're corrupting them to the point where they're not for gifted students anymore at all. They're just some silly bullshit equal outcome, race, gender, free for all things. So it's happening all over. Now I noticed this some years ago. One of my kids was quite bright and went out of my way to make sure that he had everything he needed and was encouraged and supported. And so he's doing quite well. And so I wasn't surprised when he got selected for one of these high schools that had the gifted student program. But on the big day when you go to the ceremony, this is graduating to high school. So I go along, and the six kids that are going to the selective this gifted student high school are three boys, three girls, three whites, and three non-whites. Now, at that stage in that school, the proportion of non-whites was maybe a quarter at best. So they were heavily overrepresented in the numbers. So really there should have been one, two at the very most there, But anyway, that was it. So I comment to the head teacher there that, I don't think it was a natural outcome. There would be exactly three boys, three girls, three whites, three non-whites. I mean, that's clearly a contrived outcome. So already they were bastardizing that program, which previously, if you looked at the gifted program high school, it was sort of 98% white, and more than three quarters were boys. So that was the gifted program. And so they started to change that and produce the outcome that I witnessed. But I'm mentioning it to the teacher was completely unapologetic. It was their role as teachers to socially engineer society and to make sure that outcomes were equal and equity and all this sort of stuff. So very much the language that teachers relate to, and what they're what's pushed at them in teachers training schools and things like that. When the course material they're given is all full of this bullshit. So and teachers aren't very bright. And this teacher that I was talking to, gee whiz, if her IQ was even 100, I'd be surprised. But there you go. So, but this if you just look at the kids that were selected, there were two kids were selected, a boy and a girl from a racial group that are notorious for being very bad students. Their attention span in class is low. That they do nothing but cause trouble, and they're disruptive. They're low IQ, and they're never going to make it into a program for gifted students. Some of them may be in sports, perhaps, but even not very many of them. So they were there, and there was an Asian kid who did look rather bright, by the way. But the rest really, there's probably two that you'd say deserved to go through to the program now, and four that clearly didn't. Now, I sort of don't mind in some ways if you put a few low IQ kids among brighter kids, then will they try and raise up to be the same level as the kids around them? They don't want to be left behind. They feel embarrassed, so they study harder, they work harder, they apply themselves harder, that sort of thing. So maybe there's some merit in sprinkling a few not so gifted kids among the gifted, and I don't really have a problem with that. But it took maybe 3 to 4 years from the time they changed it from the schools, the gifted schools, to go from all gifted or mostly gifted, I suppose. Yeah, I'm sure there's a few that have got through there, parents with influence or something like that would get their kids into it. But to being, what was 98% white is now less than 25% white. What was nearly 80% male is now 25% male. So the big losers at this are white males. So white males are being denied a place in the program simply to make way for brown and black kids that really don't even come close to deserving a place there. But the end result of this isn't necessarily that. Well, what it means is the gifted student program doesn't really exist anymore, because teachers, not unreasonably, given the practical wash-up of things, they teach to somewhere around the middle of the class. They can't just teach to the smartest kids, otherwise they can't teach to the dumbest kids, otherwise then the others miss out. So they kind of try and find some midpoint. But what it means is it drags the people at the top down in order to make the people at the bottom come up just a little bit. So the price paid is quite high. And now what used to happen in schools used to be streamed. The brightest kids would be in 1 and then 2 and 3 and 4 like that. They abandoned that as being elitist, but then created the gifted program for gifted bright kids in these high schools. But then they bastardized and corrupted that. So really now there's nowhere for bright kids to go other than a private schools, and the better private schools. And even some of the upper mid-tier private schools are now cheap. They're encouraging the kids to worship Che Guevara and Nelson Mandela and to poo-poo all white heroes and all the white icons throughout history. So when we look at our history this is white history being eradicated and all this sort of thing, we can see part of here the gifted programs, and there's like some, they still keep the ostensible gifted program in place, even though it's not for gifted kids anymore. There are some schools now like 100% brown and black. There's no white kids in them. So clearly white kids are particularly white males, are the huge losers out of this program, all in the name of creating some bullshit ideological social equity. And even governments that are right of centre do nothing to stop this, nothing to stop it. So it carries on unabated. So these radical ideologues in teachers' unions and the fucking communists in the education departments, they're just running riot, and no one's opposing them or stopping them or even complaining about it. Certainly not in the government. Our elected representatives do nothing, no matter how many complaints they get. So it's not Bill de Blasio in New York or it's happening all across the Western world. Every program that was once for gifted white kids is now being either dismantled completely or bastardized and corrupted. You've been with Tacitus Today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.